Hey, what's up guys? Back again with another video in the Java web development series. This time I'm going to show you how to make a servlet and how to process HTTP requests using a servlet. So let's go ahead and start making a new web application here. I got everything selected. My application server is Tomcat, Java EE version is 8, Java 14, and make sure you don't forget to select web development right here. And now click next, give it a name. So we're going to call this what should we call this? Actually, let me move it to, I want to move this from here. So my project will be in this folder. So we're going to call this project Servlet tutorial, making a Servlet tutorial. That's a good name. All right, cool. So then click finish. Okay, so we got a project started up here. Now we can go ahead and open everything up. And as you can see, it has generated for us a servlets package, which is actually new, I think, because it hasn't done that in the past for me. That's interesting. Oh, I think that's because I overrid the previous project. So let me just go ahead and delete this. Or actually, we'll keep the package, but we'll just delete the class, the servlet. Okay, cool. So we haven't made any servlets up to this point, so now we're going to make our first servlet. And there's different types of servlets, but the primary use for a servlet is to process HTTP requests, for a website. So the primary servlet is going to be called HTTP servlet. So that's what, the one people are going to be using the most. So what the servlet will do for us is we'll be able to take in the HTTP request and then process it however we want to, and then we'll return back from the function a response. And that response will be sent back to the browser for the user to either show a HTML web page or whatever that we send it, basically, right? And if you're interested in HTTP requests in detail, I'll make a video on that in the future. But I would advise you go ahead and check out other resources so you actually understand how HTTP works in detail. If you haven't, I'll leave something in the description for you to check out if you're interested. Okay. Alright, so that's enough talk. Let's go ahead and make our first servlet. So just right click the package where you want to make it and then click new. And instead of Java class, a servlet is a Java class, but we can use this create new servlet thing, which will automatically set everything else up for us. So it's convention to call it something servlet. So for example, if we make a website where they go to /cars, it would be called maybe the cars servlet. And that will display all the cars for our website or something like that, right? So you can call it whatever you want. Just make sure that it follows the common convention, which is, servlet at the end. So we're just going to make something very simple like hello servlet. So whenever they go to /hello, the hello route, then they will, that's where the request will be processed within the hello servlet, okay? And so it's going to put that inside of the servlets package. And then also it's going to create a Java EE6 annotated class. And that's something we'll look at in a second, okay? So that's pretty simple. So let's just click OK, and now it's going to generate the servlet for us. And as you can see, here we go. So let's go ahead and check out what we got here so far. So we got the imports here for our project, or our file, and then we have a annotation called web servlet with a name, and that's just going to allow you to specify the name for the servlet, obviously. And then also we got our class name, which is hello servlet, which is the name that we gave it when we created the servlet a second ago. But as you can see, it extends the HTTP servlet class here. And if you do Control Q, it doesn't really give us any information. But let me just pull up the documentation real quick. I'll just search Java HTTP servlet Java docs. There we go. So as you can see, I've pulled up the servlet class, or the HTTP servlet class, and that actually extends a generic servlet class. So if we look at this here, and as you can see, the generic servlet class also implements the servlet interface, which defines some basic stuff that every servlet will have. And the three most important methods that a servlet has is init, which is going to be called whenever the servlet is created for the first time. Then you have service, which is going to call the corresponding, let's see here, that's going to be calling these do post and do get methods, and we'll explore that in a second. But also we have the destroy method, which is whenever the servlet is destroyed. And so these are just the three basic methods, the most important ones defined by the servlet interface, and that plays into a generic servlet, as you can see here, which is the abstract class. And generic servlet provides a few important things, but the most important is called get servlet context, which is a way for you to speak to the servlet container, which is something, again, we'll be looking at later, so don't worry about not knowing what it means yet. But anyway, so let's go back to HTTP servlet, which is the actual implementation of a physical servlet. Here we go. So as you can see, HTTP Servlet provides its own methods here, and then you can see that all of the methods provided by this class are the methods that are the request types that HTTP offers, like do get, do post for post requests. You got get request, post request, put requests, delete requests, and of course the most common ones are going to be do get and do post, which is exactly why inside of the servlet that we just generated it has those two methods. But since this class offers the other types of requests that HTTP offers, you can also do those and override those methods if you want to. So for example, if you want to do a do put request, you can go back to your actual servlet and do put protected do put and override it to provide implementation, so you can process any put requests that are made to the servlet basically. Okay, so yeah, that's the basic layout of what a servlet is made of. You got the basic three methods that are provided to every servlet, which is init, service, and destroy, and we'll look at those in the future. But the HTTP servlet class, because it's HTTP, it provides a method for each type of HTTP request, which is pretty awesome. So this will enable us to handle specific requests made to this servlet specifically. So if a get request is made to the hello servlet, we can process it by whatever is inside of the do get method if it's overridden. And then the same thing for the post, same thing for the put, same thing for the delete, any of that. Okay, so that's pretty awesome. But now let's move on to the next step here, which is one of the most essential things whenever you first create a servlet. So one of the first things you need to do after creating a servlet is map it to a URL pattern. So you can do comma and then add a annotation value here, so URL pattern, and you can provide a URL pattern. And what this means is that, so for example, if the URL pattern I have here is /hello, that means that whenever they go to localhost 8080/hello, this servlet here will be invoked because that's the servlet that is matched to the /hello pattern. Okay, so that's how that would work. And you can do as many things as you want to. You can do /hello/hi. You can even do /hello asterisk. You can do whatever you want. And we're going to explore it in the next episode how to do URL patterns in more detail. But just know that whenever you first create a servlet, you need to map it to our URL pattern so that the servlet is called whenever you go to that specific URL pattern, right? So you can match it to that, and the servlet container, which manages all the servlets, will be able to match it to this servlet. So both ways. And so we're going to explore that, like I said, next episode. But now that it's matched to a specific URL pattern, we can then write the code for what happens whenever a request is made to that pattern. So let's say we make a get request to localhost 8080/hello. This method will be called, and whatever code is inside of that method will be invoked. Okay, so let's just test this out in the most basic way possible, just by outputting something. So if we do sout and we say the get request has been made to /hello, and then let's copy this here and add it for the post request. So if the post request is called, this should be outputted into the console. Okay, so let's go ahead and test this out now. That's pretty much all we need to do. We don't need to change any of this other stuff here. That's all you need to do, really. So let's go ahead and first, before we run this, edit the configuration. And we just need to do what we did last time, is change the default URL thingy-majiggy, just right here. Just set it to nothing and click apply, so that you don't need to have any URL on the end of it by default. But yeah, let's run this now, and let's see what we can do. Alright, so the website has been opened on my other screen. Here we go. And so as you can see, it has the default message that is sent for the index.jsp file here. So of course this index.jsp, like we saw last episode, is going to be the index by default, and you can change it to whatever you want to. So that's the default route, but what happens when we go to /hello, which is what we mapped our servlet to? So if we do /hello, boom, nothing happens on the screen here. But if we check our console, we can see that it says the get request has been made to /hello, which is exactly what we expected. And if you know anything about HTTP requests and basic web development, if you just go to any URL in the browser and go to it and press enter or whatever, that's going to be a get request by default. If you want to make a post request, you have to either use a form or do something special, like there's actually a tool you can use called Postman. And Postman allows you to make post requests and other types of requests to any URL on the interwebs, so that you can either test it out, get information, whatever you want to do. So I'd recommend that you download that if you want to. It's called Postman. I'll leave a link for that in the description below. Okay, so you're going to see something like this if you download it. And so what we can do here is choose what type of request we want to make to that URL that we provide. So we've already made a GET request, so let's just test out the GET request one more time. So we'll do localhost. Let me zoom in for you guys. Localhost 8080 port 8080/hello. Actually, we'll do the index port, the index route first. So let's do send here. And now what it's going to do is make a GET request to localhost 8080, and then it's going to show you the response. And as you can see here, the response was HTML code that was sent back to the browser. And you can see all the stuff that we would see within IntelliJ for the JSP file. So what happens behind the scenes, in case you're curious, is a GET request is made to the default route, and that's going to be sent to the index.jsp file, which is going to be sort of converted into a servlet behind the scenes, and it's going to be processed as a servlet. And then it's going to do all the backend processing if we have any special code inside of here, and that's going to be converted back into HTML, and then that HTML is going to be sent in the HTTP response back to the browser, so the browser can display that HTML back to the user. So even though we have a JSP file here, whenever it's processed into HTML and then sent to the browser for display. Okay, so yeah, we'll explore JSPs in the future in much more detail, but a JSP is very, very similar to a servlet because behind the scenes it's actually converted to a servlet, and it works very, very similarly, if I think that's a word, similarly. But anyway, just in case you were curious, that's how you do that. So now let's try making a GET request to /hello, which is our route that we made that we mapped to our servlet. So let's do send here. And now nothing is actually sent in the response, but if we check our console here, we can see that it again says the GET request has been made to /hello. So it doesn't actually have to send anything concrete inside the HTTP response, but as you can see, it's actually doing something. That it's just that the user does not see that. Yeah, so now let's finally test our post request here. So we're going to make a post request to localhost 8080/hello, and we should get that response or that output into the console shortly. So send it, and there we get it. The post request has been made to /hello. So just to reiterate, what is happening here is you are sending an HTTP request to the localhost 8080/hello. And then it's going to be a post request, so it's going to be sent to this method here. This method is going to be called, and the only code within this method is system.out.println. The post request has been made to /hello, so that's the only thing that's really going to happen. You're just going to get a response with really nothing inside of it, and that's okay. You don't have to actually put anything inside of a response if you don't want to. But now let's go ahead and look at how we can use the response to send data back to the browser for display or whatever we want to do. So if you look at these two methods here, one thing that they have in common is the request and response objects, and these are pretty much exactly what they sound like. The request object allows you to get request information that was sent inside of the HTTP request when it was sent to the servlet, and then the response object is going to be used to send information back to the user, the browser, of course, and you can put any information inside of this. So if you know how HTTP works, then you would know that whenever the browser or whenever the server responds to the client, then it's usually going to have a content type, and the content type can be many different things, but the most common one is going to be HTML, and that just tells the client what data is being sent back to the browser, what data is being received, basically, right? So that's just helpful for the client. So let's take a look at what different content types we have here. So I'll leave a link for this in the description below. But some of the basic types that we have here is plain text, which is, obviously just a regular text file pretty much. You're sending literal characters back to the client through the HTTP response. And then also you have CSS. You can send CSS files back to the client. Of course, HTML is the most common because that's how this page here is being displayed through HTML, and then any other page. And then, of course, you can also display or send back JavaScript to the client. And you have many other different types here. You have audio types. You have multi-part form data. You have videos. Of course, that's media. And you can explore this if you want to play around with the different types that you can send in a response. But let's go ahead and check out how we can send, for example, let's try using the text/plain content type, so that in our response, we're sending plain text. That's all we're doing pretty much, okay? So we can use the response object to do that. So if we do response dot, we have all these different methods here we can play around with. But if we want to set the content type of our HTTP response, so we can do set content type, and then provide a string for whatever the response type is going to be, which is again going to tell the client what data is being received from the HTTP request and response. Okay, so let's say we want to send basic text, right? So text, plain text. So we'll do our text / plain. So that will tell the clients that you're about to receive plain text. So now how do we input data into the actual response that we want to send back to the client? We can do response.getWriter, and this writer here will allow us to basically enter characters into the response that is going to be sent back to the user. And you can use print line, print, all that stuff here. So let's say we want to send a simple message back in the response. So we can say here is a line, and then if we want to, we can add any other amount of lines in text that we want to add. So getWriter.print line, and we could say here is another line, and yeah, you can do whatever you want literally. So that's the most basic way that you can edit a response that is going to be sent back from the servlet to the client after a request is processed. Okay, so that's all you got to do really. So you're just telling it what response is being sent to the client, and then you're providing the actual response itself. So now let's go ahead and start up our web application again and see what happens whenever we make a GET request to the /hello route or URL pattern. Same thing. Okie dokie, so I got my thing here. So let's do /hello. And look what we got. It says on our screen, here is a line, and then it says here is another line. So as you can see, the response was successfully received. The content type told it that it was about to receive plain text, and then it received plain text and then displayed it onto the screen for us. So if you want to see in detail what happens, you can either use Postman or you can do right click here, do inspect, and if we go to network and do reload, we can actually see the request that is sent from the network and received back in the request and response. So we can see the HTTP information is what I mean. So we can see the request URL, localhost 8080/hello. We can see the request method, which is a GET request. We can see the status code, which is 200, which means it's okay. So then if we go to the response tab here, we can see the actual response that was received from the server, which is awesome, right? So this is really, really cool stuff. You can look at how HTTP requests and responses are working in detail if you want to. So this is pretty cool, but this is not too useful because what we usually want to send is HTML code, okay? So if we change this to text/HTML, which is a valid content type that we saw on this page here, we can then send actual HTML to the browser, and since the content type is text/HTML, it'll know to display HTML on the browser as, you know, a actual website, not as raw HTML text, right? So for example, if we do, let's just change this here to actual HTML code. So we'll do h1 and we'll say hello, and we'll do /h1 to close that tag, and then we'll have another tag here, so p, and we'll say welcome to my website /p. And so what this is going to do is we're going to send a content type in our response of text/HTML, and then the actual response data that is being sent is going to be some just basic HTML that the browser can then display to the user. So let's try reloading everything to see if that works correctly. Okay, so I pulled up the website here. If I do reload, it still displays the same thing. So that just means we need to restart the web server pretty much, or we can redeploy that also should do the same thing. So that should reload everything, and it looks like it's ready. So if we go back here, do /reload or reload. Why do I keep saying /reload? I mean reload, and if you look closely here, it says hello, welcome to my website, and as you can see, it's bigger because it's actually displaying it as HTML rather than just raw text, which is working because we told it that the content type in the response is text/HTML, so it's going to display it as HTML. So that's up to the browser to decide that. But let's see what happens if we change this to text/plain again, but we still send HTML code, okay? So let's redeploy this real quick. Okay, so it should be redeployed now, so let's reload here. And as you can see, it displays it as text, raw text, rather than the actual HTML, which is, of course, proving the point again that the content type is very important. The browser is going to display different things differently depending on what the content type is, so that's why the content type is so important. If it's just a raw text, then the content type as text plain, then it's going to display it as plain text. If it's text/HTML, then it's going to display it as HTML. So don't forget that. The content type is very important. But yeah, that's the basics of how you can do a very, very basic request and response. And then you can use the response object to actually edit the response that is sent back to the user using a servlet. So that's all I'm going to show you for this episode. Now you know how to handle HTTP requests and send back a response if you want to, all using a servlet. So just to recap what we did, we made a servlet using the thing here. So just click new, and then go down here and click create new servlet. That's going to create a new servlet for you. And then you need to map that servlet to a URL pattern or route, as it also is called. So that means that whenever that route is accessed, this servlet is going to be the one that is called. So it's going to be matched to that route, basically. So if you make a GET request to that route, it's going to call the doGet method if it's overridden. And then it's going to call the code inside of the doGet method. And then the doPost method is going to be called if a post request is made. And the same for the other types. Of course, if you want to override them like I told you before, you can override those if you're interested in doing that. But you can use the response object to edit the response that is sent back to the client. So you can set the content type to whatever you want to set it to. And then you can actually set the content that is sent back to the user. And next episode, we're going to see how we can, or not next episode, but in the near future, we're going to see how we can send the user, instead of, sending them raw text or raw HTML line by line like this. This is kind of tedious. So we're going to see how we can send them actual HTML files or JSP files in that case. And we'll explore that in detail. In case you were curious how this actually works behind the scenes, I have this nice little picture here I found on the interwebs that explains it pretty well. So whenever a request is made from the browser to the web server is going to send that request to the Servlet container, which is a special, you can think of it as a Servlet manager that lives within the web server itself. And then that Servlet container is going to find whatever servlet is mapped to the URL that was requested. So for example, if you make a request to localhost 8080/hello, it's going to find the servlet that is mapped to /hello. And if it finds it, it first checks to see if it's already initialized and loaded, okay? So if it's not loaded, it's going to call the init method, which we actually saw when we examined the servlet interface, or was it the generic servlet? Yeah, it was the servlet interface. So all servlets have the init method, right? And so if it's not loaded, it's going to call that method, and that method's only going to be called once because a servlet is only going to be loaded once, okay? And so if it's already loaded, then it's just going to go to the next step, which is to call the service method, which is where the request is actually sent. And the service method is actually going to be calling one of the doGet, doPost, doPut, all of those things. So depending on what type of request it is, the service method is going to be calling one of those types. So for example, if it's a GET request to /hello, it's going to be sent to the service method, and it's going to be in the service method, it's going to be calling the doGet method, okay? And so the GET request is going to be processed inside of that method, and the response is then going to be sent from the servlet container back to the web server, and then back to the client, okay? And then that's just the exact process of what's going to happen. So it's going to be calling the service method each time, and then before that, it's going to check to see if the servlet's already loaded. And again, if it's not loaded, it's going to be calling the init method, which is going to load it. And besides that, whenever the servlet container is done, whenever it's unloaded, or whenever the web server is shut down, or whenever the web application is shut down, the destroy method is going to be called for each servlet, which is going to basically unload everything. And you can actually override these methods if you want to. I'm not sure if it's recommended that you call the destroy method, but you can call the init method. I'm pretty sure you can override the destroy method if you want to, but yeah, you can call you can override the init method if you want to, so that whenever your servlet is first processed, you can have it run some code. So that's something you can play around with if you're interested in that. And I may be using this sometime in the future for some purpose. So yeah, that's kind of interesting if you're interested in that. But like I said, the destroy method is going to be called whenever the servlets are being unloaded, whenever the web server shuts down the web application. And yeah, that's the basic life of a servlet. So you call the init method once, and then you call the service method to handle each request made to that servlet. And then finally, when the servlet is done, its life is over, you're going to call the destroy method, and whatever code is inside of there will run. And then also, the last thing I want to tell you is threads are going to be used for each request. So whenever a servlet container receives a request, that request is going to be put into a thread, and then that thread is going to be talking to the servlet and that servlet will process, that request inside the thread. So even though multiple requests can be made at the same time to the same routes, each of those requests are going to be made into different threads, and they're going to be talking to one class. And so servlet classes are actually not thread safe. So that will mean a couple of things, meaning you want to be careful not to make global variables inside of the servlet class, because since they're not thread safe, then that value is very unpredictably able to change. And that's another topic for another video, like with multi-threading and stuff like that. So yeah, that's how a servlet actually works behind the scenes, and the servlet container and all that fun stuff. And we're going to be looking at how we can use the servlet container later on to do a few things, actually pretty soon, I think. But yeah, that's all I'm going to show you for this episode. Now you know how to make basic servlets, how to handle requests made to a servlet, how to map that servlet to a basic route, and then how to respond, send a HTTP response back to the client if you want to, using the response object, okay? If you have any questions about what I showed you this episode, feel free to leave a question in the comment section below or join our Discord server. We have a big Discord server with over 1,300 members last time I checked, so if you need any help at all with your programs, you can hop into one of these help channels and get some help. You can also just hang out and get some new friends if you want to, so just make sure you click the invitation in the description below. Don't forget, in the description below, I'll also leave a link to the code for this episode, so you can come back to it at any time and use it as a reference. I'll leave good detailed comments around the code so you can have a good explanation in text form too, in case you don't want to watch my awesome videos again. One final thing I want to tell you about: if you want to support this channel, you can click the join button below this video, and you can join this channel as a member for as low as 99 cents a month. If you join, you can get cool perks like a special Discord rank on my server, early access to these videos, and you get shouted out like you see on the screen right now. If that sounds good to you, feel free to join for, like I said, as low as 99 cents a month. Alright, that's it. So thanks for watching. If you like this video, leave a like. If you want to see more, subscribe. And peace.